for the Hamilton tract. We'll go ahead. We have a quorum. I assume Commissioner Riley will come in shortly. And John, you want to get us started?
Yes. As we've done most of the meetings, we've had at least one or two commissioners unavailable. They've all been instructed to either read the transcript, this is recorded, there's a video available for anyone that's not here. Do any of the parties have any objection or anything regarding proceeding in that fashion? George, any issue?
No objection.
Okay.
No
Clear.
objection.
Any other parties have any objection regarding that? Luckily, we have the transcript and we have a recording, so for any of the commissioners that can't be here. So with that, we left last time with Mr. Panzak. I believe Mr. Marleary had finished cross-examination. And Mr. Brosman, you have some redirect?
And I'm not sure if the commissioners asked questions. I believe we had ended with the neighbors, I think.
That's where I recall that the other parties had asked questions and you thought the commissioners might have questions.
Okay. All right. Well, let's go to the commissioners then. Do any of the commissioners have any testimony or any questions for Mr. Panzak regarding his testimony?
I do. I was just texting Jim to see if he was coming. I do. Let me look over because it was last time. We were talking about landscaping and lighting. So I guess first let me start with the wall along Eagle Road. Just in that it's a thing of mine. I saw that you had several sections of wall along Eagle taking that very steep embankment where the crocuses used to come up and say, wow, it's spring. And I was wondering if you have any idea of what the substance those walls would be made out of. Would it be a man-made composite or use the rock from the old mansion or anything interesting about that?
Yeah, great question. I don't think we're there yet.
No, and I don't think you need to be. It was just a question.
We hope to have it be quite aesthetically pleasing.
Good. So functional and will look good. All right.
Right.
Have you considered with your lighting plans using any solar lighting or, trying to stay on the energy neutral side of lighting?
Yeah, at this time we have not. They're LED, very low wattage light fixtures, and we do think that they're energy sensitive.
Yeah, they're very low energy use. The township just did a review for the entire township of lighting, and I understand that, but they do make lovely solar. The battery is in the base, the panels at the top, lighting, since your lighting is going to be going down and shielded from others' eyes in the apartment. It's just something to consider.
Yep.
And also to consider, I know you were talking about a walking path going through the open space, some lighting there as well. Because I think that is something that would be necessary. I wrote down a note that I believe you answered already, but in the open space that already has quite a few mature trees, will you be adding more trees to that area?
Yes, the plan is to add more trees in that area.
Good. Okay.
Leaving some measure of open space open.
Sure, especially if you're going to put a path through it. It's
Right.
good to fit.
And for, just passive recreation.
Absolutely. And are there any concerns about the wildlife that's there currently? It's very overgrown. I'm sure there are foxes and turkeys and you name it living in there. I know that neighbors get distraught when construction starts and the wildlife all goes.
Yeah.
So is there a plan for that? And I don't even know if that's your hat, but.
Yeah, probably not my hat. I actually took a walk over there yesterday and was pretty lonely. Other than birds and squirrels, and hopefully they will congregate in these areas of preserved trees and undisturbed area.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yep.
That's it for me right now.
Any other board questions? Okay.
So I wanted to take you back. You were asked questions about section 280-95, which deals with site considerations. And one of the sections that you read was section 280-95 A, subsection 4. Landscaping shall be regarded as essential to every development plan. Not only must natural features, trees, and slopes of the site be preserved, but careful attention must be given to landscaping of parking areas and providing for street trees. What landscaping is being proposed for the parking areas?
Well, our parking areas are adjacent to stormwater management facilities, and as such, along with their buffers, we feel that there are other code sections that actually prohibit the planting of landscaping at these particular parking areas.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Any further questions from the board? Okay. Mr. Brosman?
Could I borrow a microphone? Noah, do you mind? if I
Oh,
borrow
not at
your
all,
mic?
George.
Thank you. Bern, we went over your qualifications when we started, but I don't remember if I asked you if you had been involved in numerous projects in Radnor Township over the years.
Yes, we've done numerous projects in the township.
And over approximately how long of a period?
It's got to be over 2 decades.
And do you regularly appear before the Radnor Township Shade Tree Commission in connection with those projects?
We do.
At the last hearing, you were asked some questions, something along the lines as to whether you were given the plan of the townhomes that were desired by the applicant, and then asked to work with that plan to preserve the trees given the layout. However, those questions ignored the importance of other factors such as the township regulations, as well as the importance of the common open space.
I'm going to object. It doesn't sound like he's asked that question. It sounds like he's testing.
Mr. Brosman?
I was in the middle of my question.
Well, you were given a statement, so I understand that zoning hearings, we can have very leading questions, but you're giving him the answer when you're asking the question, so just ask him a question.
At the last hearing, you testified that the common centralized open space preserves one of the most significant pieces of wooded area within the property. Can you elaborate on that and how the townhomes and the drive layout relates to the common open space and the other requirements of the township?
Yeah, as anyone engaging in an effort of site planning, there's a multitude of factors that go into that. Of course, there's zoning, what's allowed. There's, from that, setbacks, buffers, adjacent land uses, natural features. And then you start to understand the programmatic elements that are being asked of you. There's required circulation, number of dwelling units, what type of housing type you're interested in using. And then you go back to the site, and on this particular site, a lot of the features, the existing features, wrapped around in a bit of a U shape on the site. And you know, the other thing that factors into this is vehicular circulation. How are you going to get into and out of the site? Back to, you know, other ordinance requirements, access from lower order streets, so that sort of put us on Stratford Avenue. And again, when we went back to the existing features, there was a significant piece of wooded area right in the center of the site between what might be described as the working side of this property and the residential side of this property. And that, along with circulation, probably 2 access points, probably, you know, definitely coming off of Stratford Avenue, that leads us into sort of this U-shaped configuration. And then, you know, you apply your product to the site, apply the setbacks, and really, you know, this central wooded area became a focal point. We knew we had to provide common open space, and that looked like the very likely part of what was going to be required. So, you know, that became sort of the centerpiece, common open space, focal point of the project, and, you know, provided us really good potential in regard to meeting all of the requirements that I believe we've met with this particular layout.
Thank you. The topic of grading and earth disturbance came up in your testimony. At the last hearing, you did not have available the size of the area that would not have grading and earth disturbance. Do you have that information this evening?
We do, and, you know, just by way of a minor correction in our limit of disturbance, there's several wall features just to the, let's call it the Grant Lane side of our open space. We've eliminated those as we understand that those will be disturbed by nature of removal of those. And that central open space becomes about an acre of ground, just under an acre, which is about 13% of the overall site. The total amount of undisturbed area on this site is 62,966, which is about an acre, a little under an acre and a half, or 19% of this site.
I would like to go to the topic of heritage trees. The zoning ordinance of Radnor Township, which we are proceeding under for the conditional use application, does not regulate heritage tree removal. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And does the zoning ordinance define a heritage tree?
No, it doesn't.
Where is that definition found in the township code?
That's found in Chapter 263, entitled Trees, and it's Section 263-4.b.
And what is that definition?
Any tree any tree that's 30 inches or greater in dBH.
And I think we said last time, but is dBH a defined term?
Yes, it is. That's defined as diameter at breast height, or roughly 4.5 feet above grade. And that code section is 263-4.b.
And based on that definition, is it my understanding that a heritage tree would apply to any species of tree based solely on the dBH side? Is that right?
Yes, it's strictly a size consideration.
And does that mean that various undesirable trees, such as invasive species or trees in poor condition, trees susceptible to disease, or other decline would fall under the definition of as a heritage tree, as long as it was 30 inches or more in DBH?
Yes, it can and often does.
In your professional opinion as a landscape architect, are some species of trees more worthy of preservation than others?
I think yes, and I think that sort of longevity and hardiness in their DNA, really native is a good characteristic as well. But I think longevity and condition really kind of, in my view, point to trees that are more preferred for preservation.
And what about it if it was invasive?
Well, I guess less so. We're trying to manage invasives constantly, I think, throughout our region, and I think that would certainly not create an environment where that would be the most desirable tree to retain.
In your experience in Radnor Township, when is heritage tree removal dealt with in the development process?
Typically in the land development stage, we've tried to reach out and meet with the Shade Tree Commission prior to Planning Commission meetings and other meetings in that land development process.
Is the topic of heritage trees and the required replacement tree formula addressed in Chapter 263, trees?
Yes, it is.
And do these code provisions prohibit the removal of a heritage tree?
It's strongly discouraged but does not prohibit.
And there's a replacement formula if a heritage tree is to be replaced?
There is. And if a heritage tree is removed, the formula dictates that there would be 6 replacement trees for every one 30-inch tree and over.
And that replacement formula is applied by the township to healthy trees, not susceptible to disease, and non-invasive trees, is that right?
Yeah, that's generally correct. In our case, we are providing compensation for some healthy invasive trees such as Norway maple.
Do the plans for this project satisfy the applicable heritage tree replacement formulas?
Yes, they do.
In your experience in doing projects in Radnor Township, does the Township Shade Tree Commission regularly approve the removal of heritage trees coupled with replacement trees in connection with land development projects?
Yes, it does. A recent project that I was involved in was the St. Honore development across the street, and more recently, and one that took place quite a while ago was a Radnor Corporate Center along Matson Ford Road.
And those involved removal of heritage trees and replacement in accordance with the applicable formula?
Yes, they did.
At the last hearing, Mr. Rice asked you to state the sizes of the heritage trees to be removed. In reviewing your testimony from last time, did you discover an error in the answer that you gave?
I did discover an error, yes. I inadvertently gave the answer to heritage trees to be preserved as opposed to the trees that were being removed.
So the answer, you didn't give the answer to what was being removed, you gave the answer to what was being preserved. Could you go over the DBH sizes, I believe, was the question of what was to be removed, or what is proposed to be removed for heritage trees?
Yeah, trees being preserved are 8. The healthy trees being removed are 7. I could go through each one, but I did the math, And it turned out that there were 2 inches of difference when you totaled the preserved trees versus the healthy trees being removed. We're removing 2 more additional inches. I mean, I can go through each one if that's,
Why don't you? Because you went through each one last time,
Okay.
just to make the record clear.
okay, yeah. 30-inch white pine, 34.5-inch blue moss cypress, a 33.5-inch Chinese chestnut, a 45.5-inch sugar maple, a 43-inch white pine, a 35-inch copper beech, and a 30.5-inch Norway maple.
Are any of these trees to be removed invasive species?
As I mentioned just a minute ago, the Norway maple tree is considered an invasive species, and that we are removing one defined heritage tree as that Norway maple.
Are any of these trees non-native species?
Yes, in fact, the blue moss cypress, the Chinese chestnut, and the copper beech would all be considered non-native.
In the Township Arborist Review that was marked Exhibit A9C, which we had put into the record quite some time ago, did he indicate that sugar maples were undesirable due to various conditions?
Yes, he did, and basically his quote was, these adverse conditions include verticillium wilt, sugar maple decline, and other tribulations associated with sugar maple. And just kind of to add a bit onto that, I've attended tree conferences in the area where the description of sugar maple is that it's becoming a species that is intolerant of a warming environment. So that's the reason why more diseases are afflicting these trees, and the arborist community is really beginning to discourage the use of them in our area.
And did the Township Arborist Review, again marked Exhibit A9C in the record, confirm that the landscaping plans had met the applicable requirements, including the applicable tree replacement formulas?
Yes, it did.
Moving on to another topic, you had received some questions, I believe it was mostly from some of the parties that live in Tredyffrin Township, asking about the effect of tree removal could have on stormwater management. Are you generally familiar with a project being done by Radnor Township itself at the property it calls the West Wayne Preserve property?
Yes, I am.
And have you reviewed various materials on the township website about that project?
I have.
Have you seen that site recently?
I have seen the site, yes.
I don't know if you could bring it up on your screen, but we had an exhibit A26.
I guess I would need to activate the, there we go. Yeah.
So is this a letter on township letterhead that we've marked Exhibit A26?
Yes, it is.
And does this talk about the West Wayne Preserve property?
It does, and I believe that it's an extremely positive, forward-looking project that takes a degraded site of low-quality vegetation and turns it into an asset with really multiple community benefits by way of natural systems, stormwater management, and I believe these benefits will be felt in the community for years to come as this project, establishes itself and really, again, takes that degraded woodland area and allows this to become the canopy of the future.
And so at least in this case, the township felt that removing a substantial number of trees could also help to provide a stormwater management project. Is that right?
That's correct.
And the letter indicates that 406 trees, including 60 healthy trees, would be removed for the stormwater project.
That's what's stated in the letter, yes.
That's all I have at this time for Mr. Panzak.
Mr. Morlear, any recross? Let me just, before we get off of this letter, is it just a one-page letter?
It's 2 pages.
Okay. Are we going to,
And I can get you copies. We got it from the township website. I didn't,
okay.
or actually, I have a couple, if you would like it.
Well, let's distribute the exhibit so that. Do you have copies, George?
I left without all of my copies, but I did have 2. So I apologize for that.
Mr. Morlear, you want a copy? Let me just have one for the board. Let's see. That's fine. Anybody want to see it?
George, can I have
Pardon?
my microphone?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Mr. Panzak, good evening. You mentioned the working side of the Hamilton property. What did you mean by that?
Well, Mrs. Hamilton loved flowers. She was an active participant in the flower show for years and years, and had greenhouses and, other facilities for forcing and growing plants.
So when you were talking about the working side, you were talking about the current conditions.
That's correct. Which is the Eagle Road side of the property, roughly splitting the property into halves, the residential side and kind of the working side.
Understood. Thank you for the clarification. You were talking about the central location of the open space being chosen for certain reasons. Would you agree with me that one of the main reasons you chose the central location for the open space was that the open space has to be contiguous, correct?
Yes. Plus it, featured the large swath of trees that I had mentioned in my previous testimony.
Understood, understood. You gave some testimony regarding heritage trees, reading from zoning codes, certain sections of the zoning codes. Just to be clear, none of your testimony tonight would conflict with your testimony regarding the number of heritage trees you're removing, correct?
It's correct, yeah.
And none of your testimony tonight would conflict with your testimony from the last hearing regarding the number of heritage trees that you're removing from where the footprint of the townhomes will be, correct?
Correct.
You testified that in your experience, typically the discussion of heritage trees and removal of heritage trees would take place during land development. You remember that testimony?
Yes.
But just to be clear, if during land development, months down the line, if there was an issue with the removal of certain heritage trees from where the townhomes are supposed to go per your plan, that would be a major issue for the development. You would agree with me?
Well, I think that as the process goes on, we get together with the shade tree. It's always been a cordial and productive interaction. We typically walk the site. Shade tree gets to get a visual picture of, of the condition of, of these trees. And, we will be trying to retain all of the trees that we project to be preserved. But I think there would be some openness for the possibility of coming to an agreement with the folks charged with preservation of trees in the township, that if they thought a particular tree should be removed, then we would provide compensation as required by, the ordinance and the tree formula. But, it's our intention to retain all of the trees that are being planned for preservation.
I understand, but if you're walking the grounds of this property with the Shade Tree Commission and they cordially say to you, you're not going to take these 3 heritage trees down, and those, let's say, 3 heritage trees are in the footprint of where the townhomes are supposed to go, that would significantly change this development as proposed, correct?
I think that it's been my experience that, we've worked, like I said, worked with the Shade Tree Commission, and we provide all the appropriate paperwork. There's no absolute prohibition of removal of heritage trees, and, it's been my experience that we've never been in a situation where, there's been an absolute hard stop on a heritage tree.
So my hypothetical then, you don't want to answer the hypothetical. Your answer is that hypothetical just simply would not happen.
It's not been my experience, in all of the experience that we've had in dealing with the township and the Shade Tree Advisory. I think when you come right down to it and you look at these heritage trees, some might say that in the future, the really the better option would be to provide compensation for it and allow those trees to, as I've said multiple times, become the canopy of the future, and really look to the future, whereas in some cases, heritage trees are in decline. We've talked about, some of these trees being invasive, non-native, and in walking the site yesterday, there are defects within, these individual trees. And, if we are imagining, like is being done in the West Wayne Preserve, a new environmental reality, having new trees compensating for old trees that may be approaching end of life, maybe the better thing would be to compensate and replant and allow this development to be, a positive impact both from a stormwater management standpoint and a tree replacement standpoint. And then all of these trees would grow in their new spot and have a better chance of canopy fulfillment, I guess I would describe it as.
This canopy fulfillment, canopy of the future, just to be clear, I believe you testified last hearing that it would be in decades that this canopy of the future would be fulfilled, correct?
Well, I think I referred to that. If you look at, 1, 2 to 2.5 inch tree, which is what the requirement is, versus a heritage tree. But, once you've grouped 6 to 2.5 inch trees and allow them to be growing in appropriate space, you begin to recapture, that canopy loss of the heritage tree, I think, quicker than, it might be a decade or 15 to 20 years, but by nature of the 6 to 1 relationship, I think you're going to gain that canopy mass back sooner.
And you mentioned over the last few minutes, you've kind of focused on the unhealthy trees, but just to be clear, there are 7 healthy heritage trees being removed, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
You testified as to A9C, the Township Arborist Review Letter. That Township Arborist Review Letter was written in August of 2023, correct?
I have it, George. I've got July 29th, 2023.
So it's been since July of 2023? And just to be clear, you're on A22, your plans for trees,
Sheet,
EX 13 through 17.
Right.
A22, sheets 13 through 17, were last updated in March of 2024, correct?
yes. Yes.
You mentioned a plan that's discussed in A26, the letter that was that's on the screen now. Is this West Wayne Preserve property, is this plan that's described in this letter identical to the Hamilton project?
No, it's not.
Are there significant differences?
Yes, the West Wayne project has no home site features, no structures.
I have no further questions, Mr. Rice.
Okay, so we'll go to the residents, and this is recross based on the testimony that was given tonight by Mr. Panzak. So, Amber Levy, questions? Yes.
Yes. Amber, yep. Thought I was close enough. Amber Atwood Levy, Radnor Conservancy. Okay. Mr. Panzak, how many trees were removed in the St. Honore development that you referenced as a comparison?
Yeah, I don't have that number at my disposal right now.
Is it comparable?
I do know that there were 7 healthy heritage trees being removed, and we have 7 healthy heritage trees.
But the number of trees overall, is that comparable to the number of trees being removed from this site? would you estimate?
I think there were a comparable number, if not a few more.
Okay. The other question that I had for you was,
That was a few more on the St. Honore site rather than our site.
you were referenced the term degraded woodland, talking about the West Wayne Preserve. Would you define this as a comparable degraded woodland?
I don't think it's as degraded. Don't know how to define degrees of degraded woodlands, but I believe that our site is degraded, perhaps not to the degree that the West Wayne site was.
And on the letter, it said that there were 406 trees removed at West Wayne Preserve, including 60 healthy trees. Can you remind me again the ratio of healthy trees being removed and the total number being removed at the Hamilton site?
Total trees being removed is 225, and healthy trees would be 114.
Right, yeah, so bit of a difference in percentage there. That is all of the questions I have this time, I think. Hold on. One question I did have, sorry. Damian Snyder of Shriner Tree Care, do you know if he's track certified?
I do not know the answer to that.
Okay. Is that the arborist at Shriner Tree Care who did the update?
Yes, he did.
Okay. All right. And when he did the update, were new DBH measurements taken?
Would you repeat that, please?
Were new DBH measurements taken for every tree when he did the update?
He did provide us with DBH updates for each and every tree, yes.
All right. And with an official DBH tape?
I was not on site with Mr. Shriner, so I don't know what the methodology of the DBH measurement was.
All right. Thank you.
Mr. Chawla, any questions?
Good evening, Kaz Holloway, 241 West Wayne Avenue, Wayne, PA. Good evening, Bern. How many trees are being removed on the Hamilton site?
Total tree removal is 225.
And how many trees are being planted in place of those trees being removed?
We are proposing 332 trees as, when you total all of the requirements, there are 202 replacement trees, 80 of which are canopy trees.
The lady that was just here, Amber, I believe, asked you if more trees were taken down on our site at St. Honore, and I believe your answer was yes, you thought.
I think I said it was comparable.
The number of trees taken down were under 200.
Okay.
And, but we did have a comparable number of replacement trees relative to the number of heritage trees. So I just wanted to be clear. But I would say it's comparable from the standpoint of you have 7 acres, we have 5 acres. So, thank you.
Mr. Heinmel? Ms. LaForge? Mary Ann Mahoney? Jennifer Pichette? No questions. Margaret Rushman? Mr. Serene? Mr. Satterfield? No questions. Mr. Sherry? No questions. Mr. Shuda?
Joe Shuda, 14 Forest Lane. Mr. Panzak, I believe you mentioned in your testimony that you work with the Shade Commission to determine which trees should be saved or rescued, or whatever you want to describe that. But I'm curious about, how do you determine the types of trees that are going to be used for replacement?
Well, the township points us to a approved tree list. We utilize that tree list, and we also feel like there are additional species that perhaps could be updated to that tree list at some point, and we actively utilize things that we think are positive, native, and, you know, good trees that also don't appear on the township's list. So, you know, I think there's an understanding that not everything on the township list is appropriate, and other things that aren't on the list would be appropriate. So there's a discussion and agreement at the end of the day as to what species would be appropriate. We, as has been mentioned, we do have a review letter from the township arborist on the project that we've submitted. There were comments made by the arborist, one being that he felt like we were using too many sugar maples, as it turned out, and that we should balance our species so that there would be less of a percentage of any one species, and we attempted to do that. So, you know, we've responded through this process to the township arborist's interest, and you know, feel like we've got a better plan as a result.
So if I recall your testimony also, you said there were a number of trees that were not native or indigenous to this area.
Are these proposed trees you're referring to?
The current ones that are in the being removed, I believe.
Oh, being removed, right.
And
that's correct.
If I understood what you just said correctly, would be that in conjunction with the Shade Tree Commission, you would use indigenous native trees and trees that would flourish versus trees that may be indigenous and native but be less, what's the best word to use in your...
Yeah, less robust,
Robust,
perhaps.
thank you.
Perhaps. Yeah, you know, I think we're constantly trying to put the right tree in the right spot. You know, there's shade conditions and other microclimatic factors that come into play when we're dealing with a proposed landscape, and you know, we try to be specific about those trees in those locations.
And with respect to those replacement trees, the size you have mentioned is the 2.5-inch diameter, or remember the exact acronym you use for that, but.
Yeah, that's a caliper size.
Caliper size, thank you.
Yeah.
That caliper size, is there a area of the property that could be planted with larger caliper trees that would sustain or be sustainable, that would provide a more expedient shade or buffer?
Well, I think that it's possible, you know, and those are things that, you know, our responsibility here is to prepare really a conceptual plan, which has gone far beyond concept stage here.
Understand.
So, you know, as the process evolves, you know, it's possible.
And my last question would be relevant to you mentioned the West Wayne Preserve. Thank you. I've noticed and watched that from the initial construction or destruction, however you want to call it.
Right.
To where it's at now. They've planted a number of, I don't know if they would be considered saplings, I don't think so, but, you know, somewhat mature trees. But in that regard, you said that the community would benefit.
Right.
Curious what type of benefits, you know, maybe a little bit naive here when I say this, but what type of benefits are you seeing the community would accrue?
Well, I mean, you know, the obvious one is the stormwater management component of that site. You know, that's really the purpose, and you know why there was perhaps a justification to remove the trees that were removed and to start anew there, which is really, I think, you know, part of our thought process here. You know, where there is no stormwater management, there would be stormwater management, and you know, once we start anew, there will be a new and refreshed landscape here that will be appropriate for this site and for the surrounding land uses and neighbors in this community.
Okay. I think that's all I have. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Caitlin Silver. Mr. Zari?
Yes. Gregory Zari, 6 Forest Lane. Mr. Panzak, are you aware of Radnor Township's zoning ordinances? I believe this is Article 19, Density Modification Development.
Yes, I am.
Okay. And are you aware that in Section 208-90, Objectives and Interpretations, under item A, A2, I guess it would be, are you aware that the sentence reads, the purpose of this, the objectives are to encourage land development which preserves trees, along with several other elements.
Exactly what section and line are you referring to?
A2.
Let me
Me too.
just, so it's clear, because I think what was said was 208. It's 280.
280.
280, right.
Hyphen 90, A, and then 2, I think, is what Mr. Zari was reading.
Correct.
That says to encourage land development which preserves trees and natural topography, prevents soil erosion, promotes the best interests of the township from an aesthetic, ecological, and natural resource standpoint. Mr. Zari, that's the section you're referring to?
That is,
Okay.
thank you.
So it's 280-90.
Dash 90, cap A2.
And the question was?
Are you aware of that section of the
Yes,
code that
yes.
requires
Yes.
preserving trees? Do you see anywhere where it says to replace trees?
I'm going to object. It doesn't say requires preserving trees, it says to encourage.
Okay. But
It's an objective, the following objective. So in the objective
Mr.
of the
Zari,
approval.
hold on a minute.
I'm sorry.
Let's deal with the objection. So, just rephrase your question, specifically what you want to ask,
Okay, so
Mr. Panzak.
So the Radnor Township ordinances specifically state to encourage land development which preserves trees. Am I reading that correctly?
Yes, you
Okay.
are.
And do you see anywhere in here where it indicates the trees can be replaced?
Well, the ordinance has a prescription for tree replacement, and we're going with that. We did the best we could with preservation of trees. We believe we've preserved a fair amount of trees across the site. And we're replacing those trees according to the ordinance requirements.
Yes, I believe that there are other sections of the zoning ordinance that allow replacement of trees. However, in the section about density modification development, which is really the crux of this problem, do you see anywhere where it says replacement of trees?
I don't look at a zoning ordinance completely in a vacuum, and there are preservation requirements that we feel we've honored, and we've provided compensatory plantings for those items, those trees that are being removed.
Okay.
Mr. Panzak, answer the question, because he's just asking you about this part of the ordinance. Is there any reference in there or not?
I don't believe there's a reference to tree replacement.
He should be allowed to explain, though, that
But-
this is sort of a.
But he's not explaining, George. He's not. He's not.
A misleading. It's a simple question. These are misleading, though, because Mr. Zari first tried to suggest it was a requirement, and he's trying to suggest.
Mr. Zari's not a lawyer, and the witness is not answering his question. It's a simple question, yes or no, or I don't know.
But he can explain.
But he wasn't explaining. He was talking about the tree removal ordinance, not what he was asked about. So, Mr. Zari, do you have another question?
Yes, I do. Same section of the code, 280-95, site considerations. Under section A, line item 3, are you aware of this section that states location of trees and other natural features must be given first consideration in planning common open space, location of dwellings, walkways, pavings, et cetera?
Yes, I am.
And was this used in conjunction with the land plan?
Yeah, I believe my testimony earlier this evening stated that when we set out on the planning journey, we have a multitude of factors that come to bear on any land development design. And once we synthesized all of that information and then went back to the site, we realized that our open space requirements would be well served if we were to preserve the center section, which I described as a significant stand of trees on the property.
Am I allowed to ask for an exhibit to be displayed? The exhibit that Mr. Panzak is looking at right now?
Sure. What exhibit are we talking about? Do we have a number for it, Mr. Zari?
Exhibit A22.
Okay.
Sheet 13 of 17.
I'm going to object, we did not cover this in the redirect. This is, Mr. Zari had an opportunity to do a cross-examination the last time.
Yeah, the objection's overruled. I mean, there was discussion about the number of trees that are being removed and planted, and this is the tree inventory. This is what you want to see. Which sheet, Mr. Zari?
Sheet 13 of 17, please.
Okay. So that's the front page
Yes,
of the exhibit. Okay.
thank you.
Go ahead and ask your question.
So, Mr. Panzak, you had mentioned 7 heritage trees would be removed. Can you identify their location on this plan?
Certainly can, but it might take a little time.
Let me help make it quicker. Are any of those heritage trees located at the location of any dwellings, pavements, or walkways?
Yes.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Sharon David Willis, questions? Cheryl Lutz. Okay, is there any other board questions? Mr. Panzak.
The last time we were here, somebody brought up about the trees, and then we were also hearing comments, there's no stormwater management there right now. But most people these days consider trees for stormwater management. They help. So this site, right, has trees on it right now. But it does have, flooding issues because there's people that live downstream or downhill from the site. That's why they're here. The trees that are on there, like if they were all gone and it was just, I don't know, say dirt there, and it rained, would we have more flooding or less flooding?
If there was nothing there, it would certainly run off faster, which may give the perception of more flooding.
Yeah, right, because there wouldn't be trees there to help, right? The
Right.
tree itself, the roots of the trees go down into the ground to help infiltrate the water. Plus the tree uses the water itself. And I know when I went to engineering school umpteen years ago, they didn't talk about it, but now they do. I know Penn State Extension has courses in it and talks about the trees and the amount that it helps every year in stormwater management. And it's just a natural way to do it. And it's really hard, even as an engineer, it's hard to beat nature. So it helps to keep the trees there. Thank you.
I think that completes Mr. Panzak's testimony.
Can I ask one follow-up based on Mr. Riley's?
Sure.
Thank you. Byrne, Mr. Riley just gave you a hypothetical that if basically removing the trees and having dirt there. There is on the property, according to sheet A12, sheet 4, I'm looking at the chart, there is 83,643 square feet of impervious coverage on the site, and under his hypothetical, that would be removed as well. So if that would be removed, there would be less runoff as a result of that removal, correct?
Yes, that would be correct. There would be more permeability as a result of, everything being removed from the site.
Sorry, one more question. Grass, infiltration of grass, like the max might be, it's like 2 to maybe 4 inches, where trees can take like 10 inches. And studies done at Penn State state that. So removing the trees, just removing the trees, leaving the rest as grass or whatever, would there be more flooding when it rains?
I can honestly say I'm not a stormwater expert when it comes to how much stormwater might be derived from a tree. What I do know is that we've provided significant design stormwater management according to the Radnor Township ordinances, and that in combination with the rather robust tree replacement and other landscape code requirements, we are going to rebuild that canopy, and within a fairly short time, I believe we're going to rejuvenate the canopy that you suggest it would be removed.
So last time we were here, you said it was going to take 30 to 50 years to get back to the way the trees are now when they're talking about heritage trees. Is that still the case?
Well, as I stated earlier this evening, I believe what I was referring to was one tree at 2 to 2.5 inches versus a heritage tree. When you start to couple 6 new trees in the right spot in an open site where they're allowed to grow to their full capacity, I think that combination is stronger than the 1-to-1 comparison, and I believe that we can achieve that canopy sooner than this 30 to 50 year cycle.
Yeah, I understand because you're doing 6, but 2 to 3 inch compared to a 30 inch, right? To figure out the area of, say, if it's a perfect circle or whatever, right? We're squaring the radius compared to the tiny little one that we're squaring.
Right, but this is not a static condition. Our trees and our plants are growing. They're going to be arrayed in locations that will be appropriate to the new features, and this will be a site that gets kind of resolved for the next 50 to 70 to 100 years, we'd like to think, with new canopy.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we've completed Mr. Panzak's testimony. And Mr. Brosman, you have another witness? We'll take about 5 minutes
Yeah.
before we start.
That would be good, and then I could get organized.
Yeah.
Thank
Okay.
you.
But you have one more witness here, correct?
Yes.
Okay, all right. We'll take a break. Oof. Trees, and more trees.
All right, we're going to get started again.
Mr. Brosman, you have another witness. Let's have the witness sworn in.
I do. Eric Hetzel, E-R-I-K-H-E-T-Z-E-L.
Eric, would you describe your educational and professional background?
I have a Bachelor of Arts degree in Geography and Planning and a Master in Regional Planning, bachelor degree from Westchester University, master's from the University of Pennsylvania. And I've been working for 30 years as a professional planner.
And we have what I've marked as Exhibit A17. Is this a written summary of your background?
It is. I would add that I'm also a member of the American Planning Association, and I've been a certified planner as a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners since 2001.
In this A17 that I've handed out, this is a summary of some of your professional background.
It is.
Have you been recognized as an expert witness as a land planner before numerous municipal bodies, including zoning hearing boards and governing bodies like the Board of Commissioners?
I have.
Have you previously been recognized as a expert witness by the Board of Commissioners?
Yes, I have.
I'd like to offer Mr. Hetzel as an expert in the field of land planning.
Mr. Marlier, any questions? No questions. Okay, then he will be accepted.
Thank you. Eric, have you been engaged by the applicant in connection with this conditional use application?
Yes, I have.
Are you generally familiar with the property that is the subject of this application as well as the general area?
Yes, I am.
And are you generally familiar with the proposed conditional use plans for the redevelopment of the property that are the subject of this hearing?
Yes, I am.
Have you observed prior conditional use hearings that have been held on this application?
I have.
In Code Section 280-135, there's some general conditional use provisions. In particular, 280-135.g provides that a development impact statement should be submitted along with a conditional use application. Is that correct?
It is.
And did you prepare a fiscal impact analysis memorandum that was incorporated into the development impact statement that is part of applicant's Exhibit A1?
I did.
And that impact analysis memo, the original one was dated 5/17/2023, that is in A1.
That's correct.
Have you recently updated that fiscal impact analysis memo?
I did. It's dated March 18th, 2024.
And I'm going to hand you a copy and then hand out additional copies. Is this document that updated memo?
Yes, it is.
Why did you update the fiscal impact memo?
I wanted to use more current Radnor Township and Radnor Township School District budget documents. I wanted to use the current tax rates and the current common level ratio in establishing the assessed values and the taxable rates that would be applied here.
And did you update any other information?
I also updated the anticipated sale prices for the proposed dwelling units. I believe they're more consistent with what the current market is exhibiting right now.
And was this fiscal impact analysis that you have prepared, including, and I'm going to be talking now about Exhibit A18, was this prepared in accordance with generally accepted practices for fiscal impact analysis for proposed land development projects?
It was.
And did you utilize this methodology in other analysis that you've prepared in Radnor Township?
I have. It's the per capita multiplier method that was developed and published by the Rutgers University Center for Urban Policy Research, published in several different books, one being the New Practitioner's Guide to Fiscal Analysis and the Development Impact Assessment Handbook, and it's customarily used by land planners as an order of magnitude gauge of the impacts of development from a fiscal perspective on townships and school districts and municipalities overall.
And could you review the analysis that you did at Exhibit A18?
Sure.
And you might want to put something up on the screen, I understand?
Yes.
That's part of A18?
Yep. I'm not sure how I projected. Is that, there we go. This is the summary table that is contained on the last page of Exhibit A18. It's a concise summary. The narrative of the memorandum explains how these numbers were estimated. Just going through line by line, the top section summarizes the background assumptions, the number of units being 38 residential units. The value per unit assumption I used was $1.75 million per unit. Times 38 gets you a total market value of $66.5 million. The assessed value is estimated by applying the Delaware County common level ratio to the market value to arrive at $43.75 million. That's the basis on which the taxes are levied in the township and the school district. Next summarizes the population profile of the proposed development. We're projecting there will be 84 new people residing here on this property, including 8 school-aged children that would be attending the Radnor Township School District. The next section shows the revenues and costs that are projected to accrue to the Radnor Township, starting first with the real estate tax, applying the millage rate that's noted there to the assessed value. We're estimating $106,597 in real estate tax revenues. Non-property tax revenues would include things like permits, fees, fines, and things that occur on an annual basis. The real estate transfer tax is a 1% tax that is paid to the township every time a unit sells. We're estimating that 5% of the units would sell each year to get to that number. Summing those up, we're looking at total township revenues of $192,741. Next, we move on to the township cost calculation. I mentioned that's based on a per capita cost model. And to arrive at the per capita cost per resident in the township, I examined the township budgets and the relative mix of land uses to establish a per capita cost per resident versus per capita cost per non-resident. That would be employees working in the township. So it's tailored to the way the township currently spends its money today to provide services to residential land uses. And in this particular analysis, I considered 100% of the general fund expenses to arrive at a per capita multiplier per resident of $1,010.05, extending that across the 84 proposed residents, establishes a township annual expense of approximately $84,000 a year to service the new residents in the development. Subtracting that from the township revenues arrives at a net positive township fiscal impact of $107,897. Moving down to the Radnor Township School District section, the real estate tax revenue is levied at that millage rate indicated there, 14.6329 mils, to arrive at a tax revenue on an annual basis of $640,189. We have a modest amount of non-property tax revenues that's generated by things like activity fees and the like. Again, these numbers come from the way that the school district spends its money according to its most current budget document. Intergovernmental revenues are noted. They're calculated on a per capita student basis based on the annual revenues that the district receives from state and federal sources. And then the real estate transfer tax, similar to the township calculation, we assume 5% turnover of properties a year once it's been fully stabilized and fully occupied. The district levies the real estate transfer tax at 0.5%. Adding those revenues up together, you get $700,633 in school district revenues on an annual basis. And again, the expenditure or the cost number for the school district was calculated on a per capita basis, once again by establishing a cost per student by looking at the school district budget document, dividing the total enrollment into that total expenditure number. In the budget document, we arrive at a per student cost of $32,179 per school-age child attending the school district. Together, that results in a net impact to the school district, net positive fiscal benefit of $443,198 per year. Adding those township and school district benefits together yields a total net annual fiscal impact to the combined taxing authorities of over $551,000 annually.
You mentioned that you projected 8 school-age children. Is it possible that if there were school-age children in this development, that they would not go to the Radnor School District?
That's correct. There's a certain percentage of students in the school district that attend private schools or other educational facilities.
And if that were the case, then there would obviously not be any cost to the Radnor School District for any, typically for any student that went to a private school, for example.
That's correct. So for every student that doesn't attend Radnor Township schools, they would see an increase in the net fiscal impact of $32,179 or somewhere thereabouts, order of magnitude. I do believe that there's some responsibility for busing of students that the school district accounts for, so that number could vary. But in general, it's meant to be an order of magnitude impact assessment.
But you didn't take any credit or reduce any of the projection based on the fact that they might not all go to the township or to the school district, correct?
Correct.
If your values were higher than $1,750,000, would that be a more positive, tend to be a more positive fiscal impact?
It would be.
Since the time of the application, have you gotten any information from the Radnor School District about the actual experience of the school district with school-age children that live in other townhome communities in the township?
I did. There's actually a paragraph in the report that speaks to that. I spoke to the Transportation Department of the school district on March 7th, just to understand the amount of school-age children that are generated by similar developments in the township. And I picked 5 developments comprising a total of 39 units that we believe to be comparable, at least in form and cost or value profile to the proposed. And out of those 39 units, there are only 3 school-age children that the Transportation Department considers in their provision of services to those communities. That relates to a demographic multiplier of 0.077 students, school-aged children per residential unit. The number I used, again, it came from a Rutgers University study specific to single-family attached housing in Pennsylvania. That was 0.21 school-aged children per unit, which is somewhat higher than the reality in the units that the school district reported to me in Radnor Township.
And what were those developments that were considered?
We looked at 11 units at Villa Strafford, 8 units at Wayne Walk, 6 units at Jardin, 8 units at Wicklow Court, and 6 units at Bloomingdale Avenue. And they're all single-family attached projects.
In your professional opinion, will the proposed redevelopment have adverse fiscal impacts that would not normally be associated with a similar townhome development?
No, it wouldn't. In fact, I think anecdotal evidence notes that, to me, that what I've seen, that this type of development would probably have less of an impact than one of a lower value profile, where you may have more school-age children attending schools or larger families living in them.
I'd like to turn to some other topics. Code Section 28135.g .1a addresses consistency of the proposed use with the Radnor Township Comprehensive Plan. Are you generally familiar with the current Radnor Township Comprehensive Plan?
I am.
And in your professional opinion, is the proposed use generally consistent with the Radnor Township Comprehensive Plan?
I believe that it is, yes.
And would you give some examples?
Sure. I'm looking at the current version of the Township Comprehensive Plan, page Roman numeral 6 of the executive summary. Item 6 notes a goal to undertake a variety of strategies to preserve and/or increase housing density and diversity in appropriate locations. And one of the mechanisms to do that is to, quote, allow for increased housing density immediately surrounding commercial areas and particularly near transit centers. And this property exhibits that characteristic. It's directly adjacent to 2 commercial facilities, and it's located in very close proximity to the train station. Another planning goal and objective is noted on page 25. of the executive summary. That would be to accommodate reasonable growth using innovative growth management techniques such as transit-oriented development, traditional neighborhood design, and other flexible design techniques that harmonize with and enhance the existing community. I believe this proposal is consistent with that goal using the density modification provision of the R4 underlying zoning district. Moving further into the plan, there's a goal to promote conservation development strategies for new development on large parcels. I believe that the density modification provisions promote that at this location insofar as they require the open space that we're providing, and that open space that's provided is a direct result of that density modification provision.
Thank you. Moving to another code provision, 28135G1E, as in Edward, addresses the proposed use's impact on nearby commercial facilities within the township and surrounding municipalities. What is your professional opinion as to the impact of the proposed use on nearby commercial facilities?
I think the increased residential density at this location would have a beneficial impact on surrounding and nearby commercial facilities, and that would be providing additional customer base to patronize those facilities.
And in fact, this property is immediately adjacent to the Eagle Village shops, correct?
That's correct.
And a pathway is provided to provide easy access from the residents to that commercial center? Is that correct?
That's correct, and I believe that the sidewalks are being provided. Also open that access up to the surrounding community to access the commercial facilities that are adjacent to this proposed development.
Code section 28135G1G addresses impact on police and fire protection. Was that covered in your memo?
It was. I noted on page 4 of the memo that there would be very minimal projected demand for public safety services to be provided to the facility based on published demand factors, again, from Rutgers University. They were the best factors I had available to me, but they all indicate very fractional demand increases as a result of the proposed development. And the comp plan notes on page 9.3 that historically Radnor Township has a low crime rate and is known as a safe place to live. So I believe that this is a compatible type of a land use within a community that exhibits that type of a safety profile.
Code section 28135G1 also addresses the proposed use's impact on the township's open space and recreational facilities. What is your professional opinion as to the impact of the proposed use on the township's open space and recreational facilities?
The proposed use will contain its own open space for passive recreation enjoyment by the residents on site. So that means they wouldn't need to go elsewhere for that. Not to say that they wouldn't, but they would have that directly available to them, whereas another type of use could be developed at this location under the existing zoning that wouldn't require such open space.
In your professional opinion, will the proposed redevelopment have any greater impact on the township's open space and recreational facilities than would normally be associated with a similar townhome development?
I believe it would not have any greater impact than a similar townhome community.
The code, section 280-135G1.A I addresses impact on the character of the surrounding neighborhood. In your professional opinion, is the proposed use consistent with the character of the neighborhood?
I believe that it is, and I believe it's consistent with the township's vision for this locale, the way that they've chosen to zone it based on the goals of the comp plan, allowing for the use of flexible design techniques that would promote harmony with the surrounding uses. I believe that this type of development, this location, forms a nice transition between the commercial, more intense use and a lower density residential use. By introducing residential use here at a slightly higher density, it represents that sort of a transitional use zone.
And in fact, the zoning ordinance specifically allows townhomes by conditional use as part of density modification in the R4 district on a tract of 5 acres or more. Is that right?
That's correct, and there's over 7 acres here.
And does the fact that the project has the large common open space in the location, central and abutting Stratford Avenue, also inform your professional opinion on consistency with the character of the neighborhood?
Yes, it does. And also, I'd like to note that the proposed development preserves the existing streetscape and enhances it with appropriate landscaping plantings. There's only 2 curb cuts for the proposed driveways on the Stratford Avenue, whereas an alternative form of development could significantly alter the character of the streetscape in a way that is different from what's proposed.
And does the fact that the plan has significant amount of landscaping, including buffer provisions, as was described by Mr. Panzak, also support your opinion?
It does. There's buffers provided along the Grant Avenue side and Forest Lane, as well as a buffer along the commercial portion of the site.
In your professional opinion, will the proposed redevelopment have any greater impact on the character of the surrounding neighborhood than would normally be expected with a similar townhome development?
No, it won't.
That's all I have at this time for Mr. Hetzel.
Okay, Mr. Morlier, Cross.
Thank you. You testified a lot to, Mr. Hetzel, to your conclusions, your findings on the last page. I'd like to further understand how you got to these conclusions a little more specifically. Is your testimony, and keep in mind, I just got your report this evening, so if it says it in the report, it may do that. You can simply point there, but is your testimony assuming 3-bedroom units?
It is.
And how many occupants?
84.
84.
That'd be 2.2 persons per unit.
So it's your testimony that these 38 townhomes will have on average just over 2 people in each?
2.22, correct. Yep.
And how many vehicles at each property is that assuming?
I can't speak to that. I'm not a traffic expert.
But that wasn't part of your analysis?
That was not part of my analysis.
And what is the footage of each townhome that you used to make your calculations?
I didn't base it on square footage, I based it on the number of bedrooms, which is how the methodology assesses population. It's based on bedrooms and unit type and values.
And the three-bedroom units, if we're looking at these houses, the square footage, the testimony's been, I believe, around 3,000 square feet, correct?
I'll take your word for that.
These are large townhomes, correct?
Correct.
And your testimony is that there's only 3 bedrooms, but there certainly could be more, correct?
There could be. I also, in anticipation of the question, I looked at if it were a 4-bedroom townhome, assuming all of the units were 4 bedrooms, I believe the traffic analysis used a number of a mix of 3 and 4s, now that I recall. If we assume that all units were 4 bedrooms, the number of persons per unit would go up from 2.22 per unit to 2.95 persons per unit, which under this analysis would add about 28 people, equating to about $28,000 additional in public costs, which would reduce the fiscal impact by about $28,000, from $107,000 down to maybe $89,000 net positive impact per year.
Are any of those numbers that you just went over in your report?
They're not, but I can furnish them if necessary.
And when you're thinking of bedrooms, 3 bedrooms in these townhomes, are you contemplating that the basements could be used for a bedroom?
I'm not contemplating how they use the interior space, I'm just contemplating how many bedrooms there may be.
Are you contemplating how large the bedrooms could be?
No.
You have updated sales prices, I believe, in your analysis, because as I think everyone in this room knows, the housing market's pretty thriving right now, correct?
Correct.
When you're looking at your projections of how much these townhomes would sell for, do you take into account whether the home can have a backyard?
I look at comparable, similar developments in terms of configuration, community size, things like that. So it's really more based on the fact that it's a single-family attached unit. And I would say that the way the open space is configured could be considered a premium element to this type of development.
I believe you mentioned 5 developments, correct, that you looked at, 5 other developments?
I looked at 5 developments on the basis of school-age children, that's correct.
In those 5 developments, do those townhomes, do any of them not have backyards?
I'm not sure.
Looking at those townhomes, do any of them not have the ability to have patios?
I don't know.
What did you say? I didn't catch that.
There was a question about, was he contemplating, or do any of those developments have patios?
Oh, patios, yeah, thank you. I couldn't hear.
Yeah, I don't know.
Looking at those other townhomes, the comparables, do any of them not have back steps out of the house?
I don't know, and none of those elements are really aspects that the methodology considers in these types of projections.
But when you're buying a home, people are going to be looking for backyards, correct?
Not everybody necessarily. I think it's a matter of personal preference.
But certainly it's something that can increase the value of a home, correct?
I think the value can also be increased by not having a backyard and having that be something that's not a maintenance element for the homeowner.
Well, I mean, if you have school-age children, most people would trade off the maintenance for having a backyard for their children to play in, correct?
I suppose that could be true.
You mentioned you have a study for the 4 bedrooms, correct? Is that what you were stating just a few minutes ago? And you didn't put it in your memo, but you did run those numbers.
I did.
Did you do that run numbers for a 5-bedroom townhome?
I did not. Because I don't believe that I have multipliers for that. I think the Rutgers multipliers top out at 4 bedrooms for single-family attached units.
Do you have studies available for single-family homes, detached homes?
I have not conducted that study on this.
So, again, just getting this exhibit tonight and not being able to review it, can you state what the sale price would be for the average sale price would be for these homes, in your opinion?
Could you clarify?
Sure. I believe you testified in Hamilton 1 as to the sale price of the average sale price of a home. Do you have those numbers for these townhomes?
I'm estimating 1.75 million per unit.
So about over twice as much as in Hamilton 1.
I'd have to go back and look at my analysis, but this is a different market, a different time, and there are different comparables to be considered here. It's a different format of development.
Do you remember, you did, just to lay some foundation I should have laid, you did testify in Hamilton 1, correct?
I did, but that was a couple of years ago.
I totally understand. And you didn't review the transcripts from Hamilton 1?
Not for this hearing.
If I told you that in Hamilton 1 you testified that the price point of the homes, in your opinion, would lead to smaller families occupying them, does that refresh your recollection? Do you remember that testimony?
I vaguely remember that testimony.
If these homes are now
Excuse me,
selling...
could you repeat that question? Could you read it back, please? Read back the question.
Question, if I told you, if I told you testified the price points of the homes, in your opinion, would lead to smaller families occupying them, does that refresh your recollection? Do you remember that testimony?
Thank you.
So you would agree, obviously, that the sale price has changed, the projected sale price has changed dramatically in the last 3 years?
Along with the market.
Understood. What impact would that have? Being a home selling for twice as much, what impact would that have on the number of school-age children? Would it go down? Would it go up?
I don't believe it would have much of an impact. I think you've got number of bedrooms, you have the housing type, you have the pattern, the population pattern that's exhibited by 5 other developments in the township that I would consider similar. I think there are a lot of factors that contribute to that, not just price.
You mentioned in your testimony that there'd be 84 new residents on the property. How many residents are there currently?
I didn't factor in how many residents would be there currently. I guess the more correct statement would be 84 residents would be living here under the projections estimated using the multipliers that I used. So that's not a net number. I'm not taking any discount for residents that are there today. That's just you're replacing what's there today with what is proposed.
And your testimony is that there would be 1 student per 5 homes roughly, if I'm doing the math correct?
That's correct.
Why so low? Why is it that there wouldn't be more students at this property, in your opinion?
In my opinion, I think if you look around at a lot of developments like this, you may have people living in them that are empty nesters, that have, they don't want to downsize, but they want to move out of a house that had lots of maintenance requirements. They may only be here several months of the year. If they're retired, they may spend some time elsewhere. They may be young professionals with the means to afford such a home that don't have families yet. That's sort of been an observation that I've had looking at similar communities in the area, that it's just a different family structure than might be in a single-family detached house, or a smaller single-family attached, or that would be in an existing older community that was built 40 years ago.
So the 5 other developments that you looked at, if we looked at those, we would see in your, according to your projections, you believe in those 5 developments there would be 1 student per 5 properties?
I was told by the school district transportation department they didn't get down to that granular of a level as to which of those communities might have had more or fewer children. The bottom line is, out of those 39 units in those 5 communities, there are only 3 school-age kids that the school district transportation department has accounted for.
You testified that the housing was a transition, correct, from commercial to residential?
In terms of use and intensity.
But just to be clear, it's surrounded by residential on 3 sides, correct?
It's got commercial on 2 sides, I think you could say.
Which sides are those?
The east and the south.
So you have Eagle on one side, correct?
Correct.
You have Stratford on the other.
Correct.
You have Grant on the other.
Right.
So the commercial's on the southern, south.
Generally, southern and east. South, I guess, I can't picture the north arrow in my head, but it's towards the south.
So
Closer to Lancaster Avenue, which is where more of the dense commercial development exists. As you move away from Lancaster Avenue, that's where the residential land use pattern begins to take hold.
So I understand it's your testimony that this is a transition, but if you're Mr. Zari and you live down on near Grant and Forest, kind of the bottom left with the plans that we keep looking at, he's right up against the property right now, and it's wooded, it's residential, and now it's going to have townhomes on it. Would you consider that more transitional for Mr. Zari than it is now?
I would consider it transitional as expressed in the policy documents of the township, both in the aspirational context of the comp plan and in the zoning policy that was enacted as a result of that comp plan.
If I could just have a minute to bring up an exhibit, Mr. Rice. Mr. Brosman, are we able to bring up A16?
I believe so. We have it there.
I could put it. A16, I could put in my jump drive.
No, we have it.
A16 is
That's the single family plan.
is that part of, are these what we're looking for?
This is A6 and A7?
A16, it's the single family.
Oh, A16.
It might have been in the first or second hearing.
Yeah, right.
Do you remember what hearing did it in? Because we have it organized by hearing date.
It's all blurring together.
Third
now.
hearing date for
Keeping this all straight. You're not on the records. You're not under oath, so you can just guess all you want. Just the audience. I don't know. Well, he went to St. Catherine's. Yeah, he went to Catholic school.
that was after Frank or before Frank? Before Frank.
Frank was on March 7th, so it might have been February 15th, I'm thinking.
Yeah, there's nothing with the date. I'm just looking for.
I've got it on Jump Drive. I just thought they had it.
No,
We can bring it.
we did too.
It was on February 15th. We can also put it here, right?
Yeah, it's-
If you want to do that, Noah? We can put,
You can
I
project.
have a big one.
Sure, I just have 3 or 4 questions about it. Just get it up.
Where does this need to be?
And I have a Jump Drive. We have our tech guy.
Does it pick up here?
I'm sorry. Sorry about that. Flashing the place here.
Yeah, I think that works. Mr. Hetzel, if we can go back on the record. Thank you. Mr. Hetzel, what we've done is we've projected, and I thank you, Mr. Bozeman, for helping with this, projected A16, what's been previously marked as A16, up onto the screens. Have you reviewed this plan?
I've seen the context of these hearings, but I haven't reviewed this in the course of my analysis, no.
In your opinion, is this a viable plan?
Again, I can't really opine on it. I think if it can comply with the zoning provisions, I suppose it could be a viable plan.
So it's a little difficult to see, but lot 19 and 20, if you have the U-shaped road, 19 and 20, thank you, are in the middle, the bottom two. The tri-
Object, Mr. Hetzel didn't prepare this plan. He didn't testify about it. And he said he's really not done analysis of it, so I don't think it's proper scope of cross-exam.
Well, let's see what the question is first.
If you look at 19 and 20, they're roughly 1/3 of the size of lot 14, which is over to the right. In your professional experience, is that a practical plan when you have two lot sizes in the same development that are 1/3 of the size of other lot sizes? Is that feasible? Is that sellable?
I remove my objection. He didn't testify about this plan.
Mr. Morlier, when you ask him, is it feasible, you mean in terms of layout, in terms of, because the testimony from Mr. Hetzel's been about the tax implications vis-à-vis services, school district services, township services. So, I mean, I think if your question has to do with that, let's go there. But otherwise, he didn't draft it, he's not an engineer.
Well, he certainly, yeah, my questions are focused on the sellability. He's testifying to how much these properties are going to sell
Okay.
for,
Right,
townhomes
well-
are going to sell for, and the benefit of being able to sell those townhomes in the plan that they've proposed, and all the benefits that's going to give to the township. The applicant brought in this document.
Are these lots that are feasible to be sold in the current market? Is that
Correct,
where
correct.
you're
That might
going?
be a better way of saying it.
Okay.
If you look at lot 19, 20 relative to lot 14, Mr. Hetzel, is it feasible in the current market to sell 19 and 20 when they're roughly a third of the size of lot 14?
I don't know. I haven't looked at single-family developments like this in this market, in this configuration. I suppose it could be. There could be other ways to add premiums to lots that make them more sellable. I just don't have enough information about this plan to really render an effective opinion on that.
Understood, but your client brought in this plan. This was an exhibit that they put into the record, or marked at least, and they must have marked it for a reason, that there's an alternate plan of some sort with single-family detached homes. So I'm asking you as the expert on fiscal studies and fiscal impact, if this plan's even feasible or sellable in this market.
Again, I don't know because I haven't reviewed it in that context.
Understood. I have no further questions, Mr. Rice.
Going to go to the residents' questions. Amber Levy.
Amber Atwood-Levy, Radnor Conservancy. During your testimony, sorry, hold on, so many notes. You described that the configuration of open space could be considered a premium element. Could you please define premium element in your usage of that phrase?
I think it provides an amenity that might not otherwise exist under a different design configuration that would be done under the existing zoning. I think anytime you have contiguous open space like that, that most people would consider that to be a neighborhood benefit.
And what in particular about this open space contributes to that premium element?
It's accessible, easily accessible to all units. Everybody in the community can use it, in this neighborhood can use it. It has the potential to be designed in a way that is attractive and preserves natural features in a naturalistic environment for the enjoyment of passive open space for the residents.
Mature trees have a positive property valuation, correct? They raise that premium element and have a positive valuation on spaces.
I have not evaluated the value of trees and the impact they have on houses, but open space and healthy habitat that has safe and healthy vegetation can also have that premium that maybe a healthy large tree could have as well.
Okay.
It's not just limited to large trees, but small trees as well.
Thank you.
Mr. Curley. Mr. Gato. Oh, Mr. Curley.
Brian Curley, 136 Fairfield Lane, Radnor. Mr. Hetzel, in your fiscal impact study, you had quite a few lines in there about revenue and only one line in each section about expenditures. You referenced a study at Rutgers that you used as the basis for figuring expenditures. And the number I wrote down was $1,010.05 per person per year.
Correct.
So I'm a Radnor resident. Can you give me an example with your professional opinion of the types of expenses I cause the township, or a person would cause the township? Give me some items, maybe if we had a
Bear with me,
list.
I'm just going to bring up the township budget where I
Okay.
derived that from. So the number that I used, it's what I'm looking at. I actually don't have a printout with me of the 2024 general fund budget. I'm looking at the 2023 one that I used for the previous version of the analysis, which is very similar. The township has total expenses in the 2024 budget of nearly $40 million annually, and that includes things like wages and compensation for township administration, payroll liabilities, employee development, supplies and materials, contract services, utilities, fleet, community organizations, capital outlay. I think there's probably public safety in there as well. All the things that it takes to run a township, we just assume that the new development will utilize those services at the same rate that all the existing population in the township does today. And there were no discounts taken for certain things that may not be used to the same extent because development is kind of incremental, right? I mean, you're not going to add more commissioners just because you've added 38 more people, but
So would there be an impact to expenditures based on the fact that this new development is going to have some significant stormwater maintenance items? One specific about the need to check the drainage areas for the basins after a 1-inch storm. So if, say, on a yearly basis, we had a 1-inch storm once a month, do you think that the cost of a township employee going out to inspect that and the township's responsibility to make sure that the stormwater plan is working, is that accounted for? Do you think that's accounted for in $1,010? Or do you think it's even accounted for in your expenditure?
I actually think the $1,010 number is a bit high. I think it's conservatively high. I don't think that every person that is in the township today necessarily costs that much money. You know, oftentimes in fiscal impact analysis, we'll reduce elements of expenses to account for the fact that new residents don't necessarily incur additional costs for certain functions. And it's my belief that by using the full general fund expenditures of $39,688,000, that we've taken more of a conservative cost approach.
And you noted that this was a study done at Rutgers University out of New Jersey, and you indicated your professional background is from University of Pennsylvania, in Pennsylvania. So would there be any reason why University of Pennsylvania wouldn't have something more local for that?
There's nothing local about it. It's really things like multipliers and market values are local factors. Methodologies like per capita assessment of costs or proportional value of costs are just that. They're models. And that methodology is customarily used all over the country by planning agencies and planning consultants supporting public agencies and private landowners as well.
And they would all use the same Rutgers study that you used?
They would use that methodology. There are other methodologies available. This one is considered to be a very strong indicator of order of magnitude impacts. It's fairly transparent in that you can see the impact of taxes and how they're calculated. It's not based on some aggregated multiplier of imputed economic impacts. It's specific to the township that we're modeling here.
Well, again, as I pointed out at the beginning of my questioning, is a lot of lines for revenue, one line for expenditures. In my mind, having more detail about what expenditures are involved with this new development, I think would be more transparent. Thank you.
Mr. Gato? Ms. Hanson? Mr. Heimel? Ms. LaForge? Ms. Mahoney? No questions, thank you. Jennifer Pichette? Margaret Rushman?
Can I speak? I'm her husband. I'm her husband. Can I speak? That's a question.
You are Mr.
Mark Rushman.
Mr. Rushman? You need to ask questions, okay? Yeah.
You had mentioned that the train was a benefit to the new community. How many, have you made an assessment of how many people will be using the train?
I've not, but studies have shown that transit-oriented development is considered a benefit to many people. I do believe people choose to locate near a train station if they need to avail themselves of that service.
My interest is are there any impacts to, I know this is Radnor, but are there any impacts to TE as far as sidewalks or anything else that has to be constructed for the safety of the people coming from Radnor to different?
I haven't evaluated that. That wasn't a cost or revenue element.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Rushman, what is your first name?
Mark.
Mark?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Satterfield?
Dave Satterfield, 207 Stratford. In your experience, I know you stated that you didn't look at single-family homes, but in your experience, would you say a development that yields the same fiscal benefits to the township, but with less homes, would that be more or less desirable to the township?
It depends on the population profiles. Typically, a single-family detached development, while less dense, tends to have higher population. People living there year-round. Usually there's more school-aged children projected in single-family developments. So you may or may not have a premium in value just because it's single-family. Premiums are attributable to many attributes of the development itself. I believe you can have a more dense development that could potentially have a lower fiscal cost impact to a township when you look at it on a net basis.
Are you aware what single-family homes in that area right now are going for? New single-family homes?
I'm not.
Okay. If you just look across the street, and they do development, I think roughly doing the math, 24 of those would be about the same fiscal benefit to the township as the 38 townhomes. Just doing that simple math. But all right, thank you.
Mr. Sherry? Mr. Shuda? Caitlin Silver? Mr. Sari?
Gregory Zari, 6 Forest Lane. In your earlier cross-examination, you had, when you were discussing the numbers of children and the family structures that might be in these townhouses, you indicated that, and I'm not a stenographer, I don't have your exact wording, and we could probably call it up, but you indicated that it would have a different population than the single-family houses. Is that correct?
I didn't state conclusively that it would, but I stated based on my experience looking at some of the surrounding or similar comparable properties, I'm not speaking to family structure, I'm speaking to school-age children, and it's maybe my hypothesis that the reason there aren't many school-age children in the comparable properties is because maybe they're empty nesters, or maybe they're young professionals with the means to afford the property that don't have children, or just people, families that value the lifestyle amenities that an attached housing product affords them.
Okay, so then, just to simplify that question, the townhouse development would attract persons without children more so than the single-family houses would?
Not every townhouse community, but the ones that are similar to this exhibit that characteristic.
Okay, so then is it fair to say then that the net result of this development would be changing the fabric and the nature of the neighborhood by changing the family types?
I haven't done an evaluation of all the family types surrounding this property, but I see no downside to having a diversity of family size and spending ability in a community. I think it makes for a healthy community to have people that can help to offset public costs with by having a higher fiscal benefit.
So if I go back to the first part of your answer, yes, it would change the nature of the family.
I haven't examined the families in the community, so I can't say exactly what is there today.
If the community's comprised of single-family houses, and you stated there was a certain type of population in single-family houses, and this is going to be high density, which has a different, then it would in fact change the nature of the neighborhood.
It would.
He's answered this several times, and the answer was no.
Well, I think he said he doesn't know because he didn't study it, but go ahead and answer that if you can, that last question.
Could you repeat that, please?
If the neighborhood is comprised of single-family houses, and this development, proposed development, is townhouses, which you stated would have less children than people living in single-family houses, then the net result of this type of a development would be a change in the family structure or the types of families in the neighborhood.
I suppose that could be said, yes.
All right, thank you.
Good evening, Dave Willis, 335 Stratford Avenue. Would you agree that building a new development in an existing neighborhood has an effect on the existing neighborhood? Could be positive or negative.
I would agree that any sort of time there's a change, there could be impacts, positive and negative.
Thank you. Is it possible that you could build too many units in a new development for an existing neighborhood, to the point to where it starts to have a negative effect on the existing neighborhood?
I don't know that it relates to number of units so much as the configuration and execution of a plan.
I guess I'll ask a different question then. That's a fair answer. How would you know if you're proposing too many units for an existing neighborhood?
I don't know how you would measure that. I think if you were to look at it and see that it has measurable negative impacts from the standpoint of form, standpoint of the fiscal structure, and the economic profile of that development, there could be. I think the case could also be said that having too few units could have a negative impact on a community as well.
And so if it's not measurable, would we then rely on more subjective things to make that determination?
I think the end of the day, it's an individual, when you're coming to subjective terms, it could be an individual assessment. But
Or a board assessment, perhaps?
I think a board has to assess things in the context of the planning policy that is before us today.
Thank you. No more questions.
Cheryl Lutz? Okay, is there any board questions for this witness? We'll start on.
Good evening, Mr. Hetzel. How are you?
Well, thank you.
I have a question for you. So, up. Okay, so let me move closer. Sorry. So you updated this report. This report is an updated report. Is that correct?
It is primarily because I wanted to use the most current budget of the township and the current tax rates and all of that.
And you took into account the comp plan, the information from the comp plan?
That doesn't really factor into the fiscal analysis.
But did you take into account information from the comp plan?
I testified to that on other aspects, but the comp plan doesn't really speak to the fiscal aspects of my analysis.
What, I think you said something about the aspirational aspects of the comp plan, that you took that into consideration?
Not in the fiscal analysis, no.
So with regard to anything else you testified that was not fiscal analysis, you really, it's not really competent in your testimony?
No, I think the comp plan represents the aspirations of the community, the desires to set policy moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that the elements that I testified to about additional density being appropriate adjacent to commercial uses and focusing on transit as a reason to have additional density at a location resulted in the township's zoning policy allowing this density of development here under the R4 district and then under the density modification plan under which this is designed and I think complies with in all aspects.
Let me, I guess, probably clear about it. Which comp plan are you talking about?
The current one that is the current of record plan of the township, which was, I believe it's 2003.
Okay, so 20-some years ago. Okay. I thought you were referring to the comp plan that's sort of ongoing.
Has it been adopted yet?
No, but I didn't. That was the most recent, so I thought you were, or that it was a presentation. I thought you were referring to that, but you're referring to the one that's 20-some years old. Okay. So
referring to the one that's in effect.
I understand. He answered. I understand.
Yes.
I understand. So let me ask you, do you think is the age distribution of the people who will be on, if this were to go through, would be living there?
I can't really speak to the age. I can hypothesize that based on the number of school kids that are projected that are comparable to other units, that it could be all over the place. It could be empty nesters. It could be young professionals. It could be, people in their middle age that have kids that may have recently graduated high school. We're projecting school-age kids here. It doesn't mean that there aren't young families with young children as well.
So things could have changed in the past 20 years, right, since the first comp plan. And if the township should be looking for expanding sort of middle-aged, of which I'm past, residents, so people in their 30s to 40s, 30s and 40s, would they be the sort of people who would be moving into this projected plan?
I think they could be. I think people of all ages could be living here. It's just, I don't know that there's any one housing type that is considered most appropriate for a specific age group, especially in a community like Radnor Township and where we are in the Philadelphia suburbs, where there is a lot of diversity and economic means and earning potential and nearby jobs and just overall quality of life, people want to live here.
Well, 1.75 million isn't necessarily diversity of income. I mean, you have to be making some pretty good money to move into that sort of house. So it's not really an economic diversity, is it? It's okay. It's okay if it's not. But
Right.
it's
I mean,
not.
that's
Let's just
what the
answer
market.
truthfully.
That's what the market's supporting right now. There really is the market indicators because of the values indicate that there is a low supply of units available. That's what drives prices up, supply and demand typically. That coupled with a desirable locale in which to live. There are a lot of factors that come into play when you're talking about the social fabric of a community.
So 3-bedroom homes in Old Oaks, do you think they're selling for 1.75 million?
Where?
What, Conestoga Village? It's Radnor Township.
Is that a new or old development?
50s.
Typically not. Typically the newer homes sell for higher values because people have an input on the premiums they want to put into them. They're designed for a different lifestyle than some of those houses were originally designed for. And what we've seen in the numbers as far as population profiles go, new housing tends to have fewer people living in them and fewer school-age children living in them than older established housing. That's been borne out in other analyses that I've seen.
Okay, thank you.
I have one easy one, I think. Have you, in looking at all this and talking about the $1.75 million price, have you actually done any real estate comps, like in these similar units you looked at for school children, or?
I have. There haven't been a whole lot of units that have traded recently, but there have been a few ranging from 1.2 million up to 2 million. I don't have that in front of me right now, but I think,
That's
not
helpful. I just wanted to know we were in the ballpark and
Right.
not just hoping.
Yeah, I try not to pull numbers out of the air, so.
Thank you.
The proximity to the train and other ones you've done, say, are similar, that you could walk to the train, which this, I think you can. Would it be better if it had a sidewalk that you could walk on to get to the train?
Definitely would.
Okay. And then the plan of the 38 townhomes, is that the max of this site?
I haven't done a yield analysis or done any of the planning myself to lay it out to establish if there could be more, but I believe that's the density that is permitted.
Yeah, all right. And then earlier you said, too few could also be a negative impact, and then too many could be the same negative impact. It seems that if the max is 38, right, that'd be the max. A number lower would be lower, but you're saying if it gets too low, it would be bad. But somewhere in between 0 and 38, including 0 and 38, would that be like?
I haven't modeled it, but there would be commensurate impact. There'd be fewer people, fewer cost, but also fewer revenues to the township being generated from sale prices or from assessments because there's fewer units. Fewer units would be selling, contributing transfer taxes. So it's, from a fiscal standpoint, it could be a sliding scale.
And then how about existing neighborhoods that are already there, who have been there, and when it was only 2 lots that were there, not 38 townhomes, what happens to them? I mean, it would seem that they may have a negative impact. Would that happen?
I can't speak to that. I didn't analyze that. I believe that this development can be designed and has been designed in a way that provides appropriate buffering and mitigates off-site impacts that aren't currently mitigated today, specifically stormwater. I think from that standpoint, a plan like this will have a beneficial impact to neighbors.
And then I saw in your resume, lead AP. Would all these things be?
That's leadership in environmental design. It's primarily an architectural designation. It means that I studied for and took an exam that established a certain level of knowledge in following lead principles, which this development has not strived to achieve any sort of a lead certification. So I've not analyzed it in terms of a lead certification.
Like I know, if you put something in, say they're going to have a heater or an AC in the summertime, it's just going to create more heat in the summertime for out in the atmosphere. They'll be cooler inside, but the outside will. And the more units they're doing that has an impact around the surrounding neighborhoods. Would you agree to that?
I don't know. I'm not an HVAC professional.
But
I do know
that's
that
in lead, though.
I do know that systems have become more and more efficient.
Yeah, which is good. Yeah. Will these be efficient?
I have not evaluated it on that basis.
I just bring it up because it said lead in your.
I would think that modern building supplies and modern systems would probably by default be more efficient than older systems that were deployed 30 years ago and maybe failing.
Yeah.
And need to be
They'll have
replaced.
less of an impact compared to before. Thank you.
Correct.
I promise we'll get you out of here. There's a late Sixers game going on, and we're all trying to track, I know. I just have a couple of questions about the data in your memo, okay? When you did the analysis here for population impact, you're citing the Rutgers University Center for Urban Policy Research, which estimates the 2.22 and the 0.21. But it says this was published in 2006. Is that data set from 2006?
That's based on, yeah, that data set was based on population information for the entire state of Pennsylvania at that time.
Right.
Specific to the type of structure, it breaks it down by single-family detached, single-family attached, rental units attached, for sale units attached, and then by a range of values, and by number of bedrooms. So from that perspective, it's the most granular data we have available to us. We can look at other developments in the area and derive our own multipliers, but my experience has been that the Rutgers multipliers tend to overstate, which then leads to generally higher cost. So if we can say we're projecting this many school-age kids, for instance, but local data shows us that there are fewer kids than that, then the fiscal impact is only improved compared to what we've shown here.
Sure, thank you. Is there a more recent version of that data set available?
There's not.
Are you familiar with the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission and their demographic multiplier and summary statistics for multifamily housing in Greater Philadelphia?
I am. That's multifamily housing, though, which is
right.
different.
But I'm just going by their average household size, which is taking into consideration single family and multifamily, right? If I just look at this from 2012 to 16, because it says it uses the PUMA data, which I'm assuming the Rutgers data is similar, and I also saw that it's released annually now. Their numbers are suggesting 2.91 on the median, 2.7 versus the 2.2 up to a 3-bedroom, right? And you stated earlier that for a 4-bedroom, it could go up to 2.9 people per unit, right? So if we use that same math, we could potentially be over 3, almost 4 per unit. Does that sound right? This is the same data that's in the Rutgers. I'm just suggesting that this is more recent.
It's not exactly the same data, but I haven't reviewed it in detail to opine on whether or not it's comparable. But the way the analysis is set up, you're free to play out different scenarios. I've explained what the cost per person is that I've derived. And if you believe that it's a higher number, you can apply that per capita cost to that. If you believe it's a lower number, you can apply it to that and sort of see
Sure.
how
I
it
mean, I
plays out.
appreciate that. I mean, I can do the math. I'm just not an expert, right? Like, I shouldn't have to do the math, I think is the point. Then their data on school-age children in here suggests that they're almost 0.6 and you've got 0.2 in your data. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because I think it could materially change your financial assessment based on the population that we're looking at in the data set, right? We went down to 80,000, I think, net value when we went up to 2.9. If we went up to 4, it could go down to what, 50,000 or so?
I haven't done the math on that.
Okay.
I could say, though, that under this scenario, it would take almost 14 more school-age kids just to bring the school district impact to a neutral impact.
Sure.
And I find that to be very hard to believe, given what we know about the demographics of similar projects that we examined.
Okay. On the public safety services and facilities, it looks like we use the Development Impact Assessment Handbook, right? When was that published?
That was published in the 90s.
95, right? So would that data be different now than it was in 95? Or that assessment of the
It could be, and it
investigators?
could also change due to local
Could
factors.
be up or down, right?
It could be up or down. I haven't had the opportunity to talk to any public safety officials about that, specifically here. I'm going off of what the comp plan notes, that one benefit of Radnor Township is it's a safe community that doesn't seem to require a heavy level of policing as opposed to other communities possibly.
I'd agree with that. They do a great job. I think the reason I'm bringing this up and the reason I'm asking the question is because you have multiple sites in the memo, 85, 94, 2006, 95, and here we are in 2024 with more local and recent data sets. I'm just confused as to why we didn't use newer data.
Well, the methodology doesn't change over time. The
Not
methodology is what
arguing
it
the
is.
methodology, data set.
And I feel that I've used data, underlying data where I have used it, that provides at least a conservative estimation. I do believe that if we went more locally, we'd probably find lower population numbers. And we do see that that's borne out in the school-age kids analysis.
More local than Delaware Valley?
Yeah, I think if we went school district-wide or county-wide, even, county, you've got a lot of difference between parts of southern Delaware County and Radnor Township.
Yeah, and arguably across the whole state, right? The data set
Right.
you're referencing is the entire state of Pennsylvania?
But again, this is meant to be an order of magnitude analysis.
I guess I'm just, listen, I'm not arguing the methodology. I think it's appropriate. I'm confused because it seems like the data you're using presents a more favorable financial analysis than what I'm seeing for Delaware Valley here. I just did a Google search. I'm not an expert, right? I'm just confused as to why we didn't use something that's more recent to try to get us even a more conservative look at the, fiscal impact. That's just my point of view, right? That's all I really had to ask. Thank you.
Just a couple other clarifications. Commissioner Myers asked you how you arrived at the 1.750 purchase price for the townhome, and you said you relied on some recent, I think, 2 sales recently. I
don't have it in front of me. It was based on discussions with my client and what they expect, I think, that this could sell for, and my knowledge of just anecdotal knowledge of the market, I believe it to be a fair assessment of the value of these types of townhouses at this location.
So you can't, I mean, you're not really identifying either of those sales. Were they in Radnor Township?
There were two that we looked at least two or three that, all the ones that I cited anecdotally were Radnor Township.
In Radnor Township?
Correct.
Okay. You got that information from your client?
I got that, well, discussions with my client, but also research online, looking at recent sale data that's available through, you can find it on Realtor.com, Zillow.com.
No, but I'm looking for a specific address. Give me an address in Radnor Township where a townhome sold for 1.7.
I can provide it. I don't have it in front of me right now.
Okay. And the other part of that, and I didn't hear the answer, the Hamilton 1 hearing, what was the market value for those townhomes?
I don't recall. I mean, I didn't review that for this.
Well, you did the same report.
I did a similar report, but that was a couple of years ago. I've literally done dozens of these types of studies since then, and since COVID, and the market has definitely changed in intervening years. So I can find out for you. And
Well, I can dig through my file and probably find it too, but that was 3 years ago, more or less.
yes.
Yeah.
My notes, Mr. Rice, my notes were 850,000.
Okay, so 850, does that sound about right?
That sounds about right from that time frame.
Okay. And we're more than doubling that today because of the market, according, okay.
Yes.
The other question I had, and I was wondering what the data development impact assessment handbook was too, but that's 1995?
Yes.
Okay, so the per capita, just for the township, just so I understand how you calculated the $1,010.05 cost per resident. You took the general fund budget of Radnor for 2023, for 2024?
Yes. 2024.
2024, and you divided that by the number of residents?
It's a little more nuanced than that. The analysis establishes two separate multipliers. One is a residential-based multiplier based on, I believe it's a blended average of the number of residential parcels and their values in the entire township versus the number of non-residential parcels and their values in the township, and it comes up with a percentage of the township that is considered residential versus non-residential. And then it's that ratio that's applied to the general fund expenditures divided by the number of people in the township to arrive at a per capita multiplier. So it's specific to the residential, non-residential mix of the township as expressed in the assessment data at Delaware County.
So you took, okay, to get the values, you took the assessment data that Delaware County has online.
Right, and it's both values and number of parcels to apply a bit of
Applied
nuance.
to the parcels, residential, non-residential. The non-residential, did it distinguish between types of non-residential, commercial, institutional, industrial? Because there's a lot of tax-exempt properties in Radnor.
Right, and that's factored in as well in that analysis. Exempt properties versus non-exempt.
But this number is basically frozen by the year we're in. So 10 years from now, what's the number? Any idea? Any projection?
I can't project it without knowing what values are going to do, what assessments are going to be like, how many more residential developments come in versus non-residential developments. It could change that ratio a bit. In my experience, I've looked at studies that I did 10 years prior, and it's really tends to be a very minimal difference in that ratio of residential to non-residential, especially in a community like Radnor where it's fairly developed as it is today. If you were going into a rural community where there's lots of open land and there's no, you may have no idea how much residential is going to come in versus non-residential, that could have more variability. But I think in Radnor, you probably wouldn't expect to see that much of a swing in the residential versus non-residential ratio, you know, as far as a percentage goes.
But you're attributing $84,844 today based on the current budget and the current values, which would then be offset by the revenues. But the costs are going to increase over time to the township.
And typically, so does tax rates.
Do you think the revenues will also increase over time?
Usually that's what happens. Yes.
That's all I had. Any other questions?
Have you factored in the fact that the township has a separate stormwater fee versus that being part of the general funded budget?
No.
Okay.
I believe
Because
they
that
also.
would be a separate stormwater funding.
That'd be a separate fee. I'm not sure on the basis of how that's applied. Is that a one-time fee that's applied?
It's an annual fee, yeah.
So, yeah, that hasn't.
Based on the acreage that you have
Yeah,
and
no,
whatnot.
that's
Maybe,
not
maybe
bad.
it's home value, I'm not sure.
And what also doesn't get reflected in here is other one-time fees like recreation fees that get paid up front, the transfer tax fees that are paid on the sale of the property to the developer, and then on the sale of each new home to each new homeowner. None of that's captured in this
Got it.
table of annual revenues.
Thank you, that's helpful.
Okay. So, do you have any redirect? Or do you want to, we're at 9:34 now. Typically, we've been,
I'm thinking with the hour that I would take that under advisement and maybe close down for the night.
and you'll think about whether or not you want to redirect?
Yes.
Okay.
So, let's go off the record and,
At this time, I wouldn't, but you know, if I do redirect, this would be the last. I would ask to reserve for rebuttal.
Right.
But this was my plan right now. This would be my last witness.
Okay. And Mr. Marlier, you have witnesses, I assume?
I do.
Okay, so let's just,
Can we ask Mr. Marlier what witnesses he has? I was asked to do and did share that information. Say that again? I was saying, could Mr. Marlier tell us the witnesses he has? I was asked to and did share that information with everyone.
The only witness that I know we're going to put up is Bob Blue, engineer. We may have two other witnesses. I don't know. I really have to look over the testimony and think about that.
What type of witnesses would they be?
The potentially a witness from the township, engineer from the township, and a general planner. And one of my witnesses is a conflict. One of my potential witnesses.
I have a conflict too.
I have a conflict.
Would Mr. Nelson be available any of the dates?
I have a conflict. I have a conflict on the 15th, Mr. Rice.
And Eric, you're not available on the 14th?
Or the 15th.
Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Hetzel isn't available.
Let's talk about the 15th, that's a possibility.
I'm not available.
And the 14th, I have a meeting that night. 28th and 29th, I'm back.
Okay. I'm okay those nights.
28th?
The one witness I for sure would have, maybe not that night, but definitely the witness that Bob Lou is not available on the 28th.
He's not available.
He's not.
Could you have, could we hold that date?
About, well, let me. About the 29th of May.
The 29th is the same thing. It's the 23rd through the 29th. Mr. Brosman's asking if we could do the 28th. We would finish up with redirect of the last witness. I believe I would have, Mr. Blue is not available, but I believe I would have another witness that I could put on that night.
I could do 28 or 29, I think, so.
So that, I think the 28th will probably be better for.
The Radnor Comprehensive Plan Workshop at Radnor Library is on the 29th. Yeah, so, yeah, I don't know if that affects people's availability.
So you'll have at least a witness.
I'll make it work.
Or a witness, so let's say the 28th. Okay? Okay. We'll have a forum. Okay.
Were there any other days in May, or that was it?
28th. Do we want to try June? I've got 3 dates in June. June 4th, June 6th, and June 24th.
That's it?
I could do 4 or 6, but not 24.
I can do 24, not 4.
But you're going to be done in May.
Yeah.
We hope.
About the 4th. All right, let's go with those. Let's go with those two, May 28th, June 4th. See any other objections? Well, let's go back on the record, and I'll do, make that announcement. Okay, we're going back on the record after discussing dates, and the parties have all agreed that this hearing will be continued to May 28th at 6:30 PM, and then also June 4th at 6:30 PM. And all the parties have agreed that we're waiving all required time periods in terms of completion of the proceedings. Mr. Brosman? you
Yes,
w-
I'm okay with the time periods, and I'd also like to confirm the meetings will, the hearings will be in the same location.
Same location, yeah. Yeah. Unless you have an alternative. Is there some like nice place you would rather? that-
Probably, but I just wanted the record to have the notice, so.
Okay. Okay, so we're continued to May 28th and June 4th, 6:30 in this building, and unless there's no other comment, thank you very much. Good night.
I'll take that, get that out of the way. Just doesn't get spilled.